Well, hello and good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the United States. And welcome to our February call, One Commercial Partner, Modern Workplace, Productivity. And looking forward to our presentation today on Firstline Workers, a massive new opportunity to grow your business. I am Michael Panzaroli. I'm going to be your host today. And just a little bit about our agenda. I told you what we're going to be talking about, and we're very fortunate to have Oriel Ruchstein in here and presenting for us today. And he's going to go through the content and answer any questions that you might have. And I'm just going to first start off with just a little community welcome, as usual. And just so you can see where you can get connected if you're not already taking advantage of some of these resources, we have some vanity URLs there. And I'm going to be uploading this deck to our Yammer community, which you can see right there on that second bullet after we're done. And we always post the call to our YouTube playlist. And so if you want to join that Yammer community, there's over 2,000 partners out there where you can connect and learn more about Modern Workplace and the offerings and get answers to your questions, aka.ms MW Partner Community. We also have this call, and so you've made your way here, so I assume you know about where to get those. And then also we have a community blog, aka.ms US blog, where you can hear from all different folks at Microsoft and the partner community all across Modern Workplace and One Commercial Partner as well. There's one opportunity that I'd like you to know about, and I highly encourage you to sign up for this. Maybe you're looking to get your cloud productivity competency, and you know that you need to pass some of those exams, but you haven't gotten that done yet. The Next Up Exam Camp, and so what this is a guided study experience. There's weekly video content and lab content that happens over a 5-week period. And it's kind of like a study group, but you're really getting this professional content as well to really help you prepare for those exams. So you can pick either the 346 or the 347. And the cost to register is $299, which is actually a really good value. So Microsoft is subsidizing this. You know, if you try to take one of these exam preps out on your own, you know, it would cost much higher than that. So with that, it includes the price of the practice test, the exam itself, and so you just kind of schedule it on the day one, and you all kind of take it together, either an exam session or online, and it also includes the retake. So I encourage you to sign up for that, and the class starts on February 26th, so you can get right there at the registration link, https aka.ms cloudprod.comp. So check that out. All right, then. So I'm going to turn this over to Oriel, and I'm really excited about the opportunity. So if you could take over as presenter, Oriel, that'd be great. I'm excited about this, particularly for our Office 365 partners. I think they can really capitalize on this because a lot of what's in here, okay, maybe with the exception of StaffHub, they're really things that they're already doing today with their partners, and it should be pretty easy to be able to extend that because those solutions are already delivering those to their knowledge workers. And so this is a great way to them be able to increase their deal size and, maybe even within their own existing customer base. So really looking forward to you presenting what this opportunity is and what it means for them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Michael. That's a really good setup. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time to join the call. My name is Oriel Ruchstein. I'm from the Microsoft 365 Partner Marketing team, and I look after partner development for everything related to teamwork and intelligent communications. In the next 55 minutes or so, what I want to be talking to you about is the new Firstline Worker opportunity and some of the things that we've announced recently, some of the things that we've been doing in order to help partners understand what that opportunity could mean to them and how to take advantage of it. How we'll be spending the time is first I'm going to share with you the new Firstline Worker category news that was that we first launched back in the September timeframe at Ignite. I'll share with you some of the product news and updates. And then we'll change gears a little bit, and we'll start diving into the partner opportunity, how you can start thinking about taking advantage of that, and also introduce you to some of the key assets that we've built out in order to help you accelerate your time to market. So that includes the offer development guidance that we've built, as well as the Firstline Worker business value assessment. Along the way, I'll be keeping an eye out to see which questions come up in the window. If I can, I'll incorporate the response into the discussion. Otherwise, at the end, we can pause a little bit and we can review what open questions we've got, double back, and close out the ones that we can. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. Before going any further, the first thing that I want to do is just clarify what it is that we mean by Firstline Worker. We came up with this as a new term back in the September timeframe, and so I don't want to make the assumption that everybody is familiar with the term. You may have previously been familiar with the Office 365 kiosk SKU. So previously we've spoken about this category of worker as a kiosk worker or a deskless worker. For a brief period of time, you may have heard this category of worker being referred to as a frontline worker. And now we're talking about them as a firstline worker. It's essentially the same type of worker, the worker that doesn't spend most of their time behind a desk, and is also not what you would consider to be a knowledge worker, someone that creates a lot of content. We think of them as the folks that are on the first line. They're the first to see customers. They're the first often to create products. They're often the first to hear about feedback from customers and complaints from a service perspective. And so they really are out there on the first line, and they represent a really big portion of the global workforce, the majority of the global workforce, in fact. And so when we were thinking about the fact that digital transformation is now at the heart of almost every customer's technology strategy, we felt that even though we had some products that catered for this category of worker in the past, it wasn't really a core part of our strategy. It wasn't a core part of our go-to-market, and that we could actually be providing a much stronger value proposition to this category of worker. At the end of the day, it's actually very difficult for a customer to achieve its digital transformation objectives if they neglect the firstline workers in their organization. If you think about the type of work that these workers do, they're at the heart of the operations of any organization, whether it's customer service, whether it's product development, whether it's support. These workers are carrying out such a massive percentage of the actual work that an organization does, that without them it would be very difficult for any organization to achieve their digital transformation objectives. And so we see them being part and parcel of the end-to-end digital transformation vision, just as important as the folks that are sitting in the boardroom, your chief executives, just as important as the knowledge or information workers that we have catered to more prominently with our solutions and products in the past. And so we really wanted to shine a spotlight on what was possible in terms of empowering and enabling these workers. If we drill down into the opportunity a little bit further, the reason that I think about this as a massive opportunity is because, as I mentioned, they do make up the majority of the global workforce. In fact, there's as much as 2.4 billion firstline workers out there, and almost 700 million of them are in the enterprise space. There are certainly some industries that are better targets than others, but in general, you can see firstline workers across any industry. What we've represented over here are some examples of the type of worker within the industries that we think represent the best opportunity today. And so in manufacturing, that could be the shop floor workers or the warehouse clerks. In retail, it could be the sales associates or the cashiers. In transportation, it might be drivers or ground crew. In hospitality, it could be housekeepers or the guest services staff. Public service, it could be any one of the clerks, firefighters, or police officers out there. And in healthcare, you've got a combination of nurses or first responders or even providers that may make up that first-line workforce for you. And so when you look at those types of numbers, although certainly you would say that the cost per user that a customer would be willing to pay would be lower, the sheer volume that exists out there quickly adds up to something that is a fairly interesting opportunity for us. So let me talk a little bit about what is our first line vision. in order to maximize the impact of the firstline workforce. We've got these 5 pillars. The first of them is the focus on fostering culture and community. And this really talks to how organizations are transforming today, how it's not so hierarchical, how good ideas don't just get created at the top of an organization and flow down, how you need to have that more fluid flow of information and ideas from the bottom up in order for people to be able to communicate well with each other, innovate effectively, and really put companies on the cutting edge, enable for them to compete more effectively. So by fostering their culture and community, you're able to drive a lot of that innovation by empowering those workers to speak to each other, share best practices, actually take what they take pride in and allow them to amplify that and put that out there to the broader community. We've seen that there's a strong correlation between that and increased business performance. Also, what we've seen from the research is that there's a strong correlation between that and some of your key employee retention metrics and employee satisfaction metrics. And that's a good segue into the next pillar, which is training and upskilling those employees. So when you take the ability for those employees to interact more effectively with their peers around the organization, and also to be connected more intimately with other parts of the organization, and you also enable them and empower them with the right training and skills, then obviously they're going to be a more effective employee for you. Certainly one of the key things that we see when talking to customers is that with a first-line workforce, your turnover rates tend to be much higher. And so if there's something that you can do in order to lower those turnover rates, then number one, you're saving a lot of money just on the training and onboarding costs alone. But secondly, you're getting employees that have got increased tenure, which means that they've got more experience, they can service your customers better, they can deliver your products with higher quality, and immediately that's going to contribute towards your performance as a business all up. And so we see that there's an opportunity to better train and to keep those employees skilled as new things come down the pipeline too. The digitized business process one is obviously fundamental to this whole notion of digital transformation. Any type of environment that you walk into, you see opportunities for digitization, whether it's a case of looking at a break room in a retail store and seeing perhaps that they've got charts that are paper charts that are hanging up on the wall, or perhaps they've got paper manuals that they print out and that they distribute. Often what we hear is that employees of this nature get a lot more information from public sources like Instagram or public websites than they do internally, and that can be problematic. There's certainly an opportunity to digitize and optimize and increase efficiency for processes across the organization. And obviously when you do that, you immediately also get the ability to overlay analytics on top of that. And so you can imagine a scenario where you've got more instrumentation in a manufacturing scenario because of IoT being implemented, but then you're also able to overlay analytics in order to provide information back to the first-line workforce, give them access to key insights which allow them to make better decisions and optimize the work that they do off of those insights. And so this is where we really get into a scenario where you start to perhaps fundamentally transform the way that a business operates. When you're talking to the folks that are responsible for the first-line workforce, you're typically talking to business decision makers rather than IT decision makers that are responsible for maybe the whole operations of the organization or HR and communications across the organization. And so it unlocks new types of opportunities there. Delivering real-time expertise is one that I think is easy to understand. You've got a typical service management scenario. Maybe somebody is out there servicing a piece of machinery in the field. They run into a complex problem. They don't have the ability to solve it right there and then. If they've got the ability to tap in real time to a subject matter expert that can help them solve that problem right away, then perhaps you can save them having to go out, come back, troubleshoot. Immediately you can increase customer satisfaction and the efficiency with which you can deliver that service. This is also an area where you can start to see that our investments into things like mixed reality can start to play a role too. You may be familiar with a scenario where someone using a HoloLens headset would be able to share with a subject matter expert remotely what they're seeing and what they're doing, and they could have that subject matter expert take a really close look at that scenario and give them really good coaching and guidance on how to solve a problem. So the mixed reality investments are certainly a part of this overall story for partners that have the ability to go there and think about solutions in that space. And then last but certainly not least is the whole notion of minimizing risk and cost. So in this space, the Firstline workforce is certainly an attack vector that lights up for people that are willing to do organizations harm. And the types of things that we typically see in the space are, number one, shared identities. So you've got many scenarios, perhaps in a retail store, where multiple people are using a shared identity in order to access systems, which is an immediate concern from any kind of compliance angle. And then, another common one is using consumer-grade applications in order for people to be able to communicate or share information. So we see lots of examples of people perhaps using a WhatsApp application or perhaps using consumer-grade email services in order to transfer what would otherwise be sensitive information. And that obviously can put the organization at increased exposure of risk. By moving on to a trusted commercial-grade platform and also having some of the additional controls built in, you have the ability to then be more compliant, meet your compliance obligations, and minimize the risk that you're exposed to. We've also seen from the research a pretty good correlation between being able to implement some of those controls and a reduction in the number of security incidents that organizations are exposed to. And that reduction in security incidents is obviously, there's an element to that which is priceless, but just in terms of being able to reduce the amount of time, energy, and the expense that you typically undertake when addressing those types of breaches, that's something that's also valuable to customers to understand. So that's our vision all up. And what I wanted to do next was quickly run through some of the product news and the details of that supports that vision. What is it that we announced back in September? Or what is it that we've got in the product now that can help partners such as yourself to deliver those types of solutions to customers? There's a lot of information over here, and I'm not going to try and drain all the slides. But what I do want to do is I want to at least give you a flavor of what's included over there, and then make sure that we leave enough time to go into more detail around how we think about the partner opportunity specifically. So to dive right in, when you think about what it is that we announced, we spoke about the Firstline Worker vision all up, and then within that, there's a key product that was new that we introduced, and that was the Microsoft 365 F1 suite. Now, the Microsoft 365 F1 suite falls underneath the Microsoft 365 Enterprise stable, and within that stable, you've got 3 editions. You've got Microsoft 365 E5. Sorry, I see that's written as Office 365 E5 on the slide. That's a mistake. It should be Microsoft 365 E5. You've got Microsoft 365 E3, and now you've got Microsoft 365 F1. And just like all the other editions within the Microsoft 365 stable, it's got 3 major components within it. It's got the Office 365 components, it's got the Windows 10 Enterprise components, and it's got the Enterprise Mobility and Security components. And so as we go through the product information, I'll be touching on each one of those key pillars in order to talk a little bit about, what is the product value that's included over there. Before we dive into that detail, though, it's just important to understand now that you've got the suite where it sits relative to the others when you're addressing customers' requirements. And so we think of this as just helping to round out the coverage that a customer would have access to when thinking about how best and how most effectively to license their employee base. For the knowledge workers, we would think about in the enterprise space using either a Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 offering in order to cover their knowledge workers. In the smaller business space or for less sophisticated requirements, you would think about Microsoft 365 Business there. And alongside it, you would have the Microsoft 365 F1 product in order to cater to the needs of the firstline workers. And then that combination of the E3, E5 or business alongside F1 would provide coverage across the entire employee base. So let's start off drilling into a little bit more of the Office 365 value. Just to point out that the Office 365 F1 offering doesn't go away. You still have the ability to sell Office 365 F1 standalone. But obviously, at least from a Microsoft field perspective, our recommendation is that we lead with the all-up value proposition so that the customer can understand the end-to-end story. And then you obviously customize what it is that you focus on based on the customer's specific requirements. So within the Office 365 stable specifically, things that I'm going to call out is Microsoft StaffHub. If you've not heard of Microsoft StaffHub before, it's a relatively new application which was purpose-built for firstline workers. I've got a slide immediately after this where I'll be drilling into more of the functionality, so I'm not going to talk about it right now, but just know that that was a specialized application that we built specifically to address the needs of firstline workers. For culture and community, we think about Yammer and teams in the portfolio as being able to really address their needs and enable them. We think about teams as being a great fit for where you've got project teams that are working very intimately together. And then we think about Yammer as being the broad-based communication mechanism where you can be sharing information company-wide, best ideas, company-wide, and receiving really grassroots feedback all the way up across a very broad surface area. From a training and video content perspective, we've got great assets within SharePoint in terms of providing document repository for training materials and policies and procedure materials, stuff that you might do today that you could then extend into the firstline workforce space, and Stream in terms of video content, the ability to make very rich video content available so that employees can self-service and can access training content on demand and in a more efficient manner. The security and compliance components that exist within EMS we'll talk about in a little bit. And obviously from a device perspective, we see opportunities where some customers don't just want to use mobile, but also want to use some type of a laptop or PC type device, either in a shared kiosk type scenario or by actually providing their firstline workers with low-cost devices. And in that space, we've got some particular value within Windows 10 that can help them to do exactly that too. So to double-click on the Microsoft StaffHub piece, in this case, what we're talking about is an application that was designed specifically with the firstline worker in mind. And the four key things that we wanted to enable with this application is, number one, schedule and task management, two, communities and communications, training and onboarding, and then identity and access management. So we think about this, long term as perhaps being the simplified single pane of glass that a firstline worker will be able to go to in order to get almost everything that they need. So as a starting point, the schedule and task management has got the ability for a manager to very quickly create a schedule and to publish it out there to his employees. And then there's some controls that employees have in order to be able to request a shift swap, change it up with another employee out there, another firstline worker. They've got access to training information. They can share information directly through that app with their colleagues, whether via chat mechanism or whether via a broadcast mechanism. You've got the ability to assign tasks either to an individual or to a group so that the first person that completes the task can notify the others. They've got access to the SharePoint content that can be highlighted for them as specific content that they need to go to and review. And then it integrates with the identity and access management controls that sit within the rest of the platform, and even gives you the ability to onboard some of these firstline workers in a very efficient manner if they don't already have a digital identity. So you have the ability to just invite them using their mobile telephone number, and that can automatically provision an identity for them within Azure AD so that they can very quickly get access to the application. You can see that it's got a mobile app, which is the primary experience for the firstline worker. The web app is the experience that we think of as being the primary experience for a manager. And essentially, you've got this scenario where over time, you're going to see more and more functionality surfacing here and integrating in with other parts of the Microsoft 365 platform. One thing in particular that we think is going to happen, and we've already started making provision for that, is the ability for custom workflows to show up over here. So as a partner, you could be thinking about using Power Apps and Flow. What are the workflows that I might want to enable for these firstline workers? You can think about clock in and clock out as a scenario, vacation requests, whatever the case might be. Those are things that might start to surface in the space. So with that, let me move on a little bit and talk about the enterprise mobility and security capabilities. Over here, really, we're thinking about how do you provide identity and access management so that if this is a worker that didn't have a digital identity, now they have one. If it was a shared identity, now they have a unique identity. That then allows us to start implementing a whole bunch of controls. Obviously, from a device perspective, you want to make sure that you're managing the devices and the apps and the content that sits within that, because that may be sensitive information, especially when you start thinking about industries that are more heavily regulated. And again, you want to make sure that you start getting the tools that can help you to identify threats for players out there that may be looking to take advantage of Firstline Workers as an attack vector to gain access to the broader organization. And so this chart over here just gives you a pretty good comparison and understanding of what's in the Microsoft 365 F1 offering relative to what you'll see inside of the EMS E3 or the EMS E5 suite. And so you see you've got your Azure Active Directory P1 offering. So that gives you your single sign-on capabilities as well as your multi-factor authentication capabilities. You can see that you've got Intune for your device management components, and then you've got advanced threat analytics in order for you to start to see when some of your users are being targeted for attacks. So those are the three major components that sit within the Microsoft 365 F1 suite from an enterprise mobility and security perspective. Moving on into the Windows 10 story, here you may be familiar with the term Microsoft 365 Powered Device. Microsoft 365 Powered Device doesn't refer to a piece of hardware. It really talks to any device, any PC or laptop that is running Windows 10, might also be running Office 365 Pro Plus, and is managed by Enterprise Mobility and Security. And so when you've got that combination of things, that's what we talk about as a Microsoft 365 Powered Device. And so within the space, we've got a particular offering and value proposition for Firstline Workers as well. I think it's worthwhile just reiterating the point that I made earlier, that absolutely we do think that at least 2/3 of the scenarios for Firstline Workers are going to be mobile-only scenarios, but we do absolutely see that there is also a group of customers that think about PCs or laptops having a place within the Firstline workforce, whether that be as a shared kiosk or whether they actually want to commission and provide those workers with these low-cost devices that they can use in order to make their jobs more efficient. Now, the standard value proposition for Microsoft 365 Powered Device, the key pillars that underpin that value proposition is that we're reducing the total cost of ownership for all workers, and we do that by enabling self-service deployment and simplifying management, and through cloud management, making sure that it's always up to date and providing better insight into what's happening on that device, so that when something is going wrong, you can correct it more rapidly and you can prevent it from spreading to other parts of the organization. That's the standard value proposition. For Firstline Workers in particular, we think that what's going to be the best fit is the newer Windows 10 S offering. So that's the version of the Windows 10 operating system that is specifically optimized for cloud. And essentially what that means is that it's, number one, can be deployed more rapidly. It's number two, it's restricted in that it only runs applications that come from the store. So that means that immediately you are reducing the attack vectors because the applications that go into the store have already been pre-verified. And then obviously you've got, from a hardware perspective and from a software perspective, you're optimizing for better performance and battery life that lasts in order to make sure that that type of device, which is going to be in the hands of someone that's more of a mobile worker, is going to last longer. So we think about Windows 10S as being a really good fit over there, also because it comes in at a particularly low price point. So we see, for example, devices coming from our hardware partners that start for as little as $275. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these. I'll double click on some of them without going too deep. But when we talk about the cloud convenience related to Windows 10S, here we talk about the ability for you to really plug into the cloud-based identity and management components within Intune. I think it is important to point out that in Windows 10S, you still have the ability to run full-featured applications. The difference is that they have to be made available via the Windows Store so that they're pre-verified and so that you can have confidence that they don't represent a security risk. So it's not just being able to run, the new modern applications that sit within the store. You do have the ability to run full-featured desktop applications. It's just the delivery mechanism for them has to be via the store, which is important. If we look at the ability to run on a range of modern devices, I've got a slide a little bit later on which will show you what type of devices are out there in the market already and some of the things that are coming. But essentially, we've got a few that are out there already that gives you the ability to take advantage of all of the good all of the goodness within Windows 10, including things such as Autopilot and Mixed Reality and Cortana and Ink and Windows Hello. And at the same time, gives you the ability to lock it down if you need to and secure it in a way that's going to be most appropriate for the use case that's relevant for firstline workers. So over here, for example, you see something that's coming soon is the ability to put it into a mode designated by something called Windows Assigned Access. And that means that it's kind of locked down as a single purpose device. That's something that's going to be appropriate for a device that is acting as a kiosk-based device. From a performance perspective, not much to say other than that it's been designed in order to optimize the battery life, and the performance works in such a way that it doesn't slow down because you don't have bloatware coming onto the device. One of the big benefits of restricting the applications that run on it to applications that come from the store is that you can be very precise about what actually gets loaded on there. And so you don't have that bloatware slowing down the machine over time. And then certainly last but not least, you get the goodness of the Microsoft Verified Security that comes through on Windows 10 in order to make sure that, again, you're minimizing your risk there to the extent possible. This is that slide that I mentioned. This is the hero portfolio right now. You can see Acer and HP have got these devices that are out in the market today, and Lenovo is going to have their device out there very shortly. Again, this will be available in the slides that you are able to download after the presentation. So if I'm moving a little bit quickly through some of these areas, not to worry, you will have access to the content. I just want to make sure that we leave time in order to cover off on the rest of the things that we want to get to. To round out the product discussion and the product value piece, this is then the summary of what is in Microsoft 365 F1. You can see that in the column on the right-hand side, priced at list price of $10 per user per month. And you can compare that to what sits in the Office 365 F1 offering, which has a list price of $4 per user per month. And so you can see what additional capabilities sit there as a result of having the additional enterprise mobility and security product capabilities, as well as the Windows 10 enterprise product capabilities. And within the Office 365 F1 suite, you still have the goodness of your Office Online applications. You still have your email, SharePoint, Yammer, and groups. You still have your Skype for Business and Teams capabilities. And you've got your OneDrive and Stream capabilities in addition to StaffHub, Power Apps, and Flow. So I see that there aren't any questions that have come through yet. Please feel free if you've got any questions or if there's an area that you would like me to double back on and focus on in particular, please feel free to post them in the window there. All right. So changing gears again, I'm going to switch to a little bit more of a discussion around, now that we understand what's in the suite, what's in the product space, how should we be thinking about it in terms of the opportunities that are available? So, as I said, there's a huge number of users out there that fall within this category, which open new opportunities for us. The research that we've done indicates that the vast majority of business leaders, almost 80%, acknowledge and recognize that the firstline workers are critical to achieving their digital transformation objectives, and that almost 70% of them say that increased efficiency is their top driver in terms of the value that they would like to unlock from their firstline workforce. At the same time, there are very few customers, percentage-wise, relatively, that are doing a lot of work in terms of actually empowering their firstline workforce today. And so what that means to me is that there is a massive partner opportunity to provide thought leadership and to be the trusted advisor that actually helps customers to go on that journey and understand, A, why should I act on it now? What is the specific reason that I should do something about it now? And then B, what does that roadmap look like as I look to light up those capabilities? And so what we've done is we've taken all of the different, product elements that sit within the suite, and we've tried to structure it in a way that makes sense for somebody like yourselves that may be thinking about doing something in the space. So this might be kind of an end-to-end portfolio of solutions or revenue-generating opportunities that you could be looking at. Let's start off on the left-hand side, looking at what's in the good bucket. So obviously, if you are a CSP or LSP type partner, you have the ability to resell the subscription. That goes without saying, and you can also bundle that with devices, Microsoft 365 powered devices. So you absolutely have the ability to take advantage of that from a resale perspective. And then what we would recommend is that the first set of additional value that you look to layer on top of that is a set of project-based services that just get the initial foundation in place. So as you can see, there's a ton of things that you could be offering the customer. And the first thing that you want to do is, I think, make sure that you just get that thin edge of the wedge in there in order to deliver some basic value, and that then opens the door for you to be able to go and deliver a lot more. The first thing, obviously, is making sure that all the firstline workers have got a secure and easy to maintain digital identity. You probably want to be enabling StaffHub in order to make sure that they can take care of basic schedule and task management. And if they're going to be using PC or laptop devices, you want to be looking at how do you then enable the self-service deployment in order to make sure that it doesn't become too much of an operational nightmare. So how is it that you can make sure that you take advantage of things like Windows Autopilot? How is it that you can automate that to the extent possible so that it's not a big overhead? Once you've got that foundation in place, you then have the ability to start moving into, I think, the tier 2 types of services. And from a project services perspective, some of the things that you might think about over here is, well, we could, for example, start setting up effective communication and community interactions. So now you start looking at the project teams that might exist within the Firstline workforce and configuring team spaces for them, and then setting up those teams in a way that they've got access to all of the additional information resources that they may need, and perhaps thinking about some of the day-to-day reports or documents or workflows that they might need access to. From a broader Firstline workforce perspective, you might be thinking about, well, what are the knowledge repositories that they need? What are the procedures and documents that they need? What is the training that they need? Setting up SharePoint in a way that then enables them to get access to that information very readily. You might think about the Yammer communities. How is it that they're going to be able to share best practices? How is it that they're going to be able to learn from each other? How is it that they can then, feed into the innovation cycle within the environment? Those are key elements that you could then look to deliver. Obviously, training and onboarding, we mentioned that up at the top of the call as being a key area, training portals, and perhaps curating the content that goes in there and facilitating the sharing of that information is another key one that could be delivered through a project-type service. From a management service perspective, we think that this represents a new opportunity in that what we're seeing is that for the most part, IT organizations within customers are scoped in a way, in such a way that they can then deal primarily with the knowledge workers within the organization. As you start extending the technology footprint to go and reach tens of thousands perhaps of new workers, the IT department could quickly find that they don't actually have the capacity in order to deal with the support and management requirements related to that. And so immediately we think that there's a managed services opportunity related to systems management, perhaps end user support, and even extending into the devices that they're using and the identities that they're using. Plus then there might be more of the adoption change management opportunities that we see many of our collab partners building businesses around in terms of ongoing adoption engagements, building out new content, new materials, helping the customer understand new scenarios that they can take advantage of, and also making sure that they can actually deliver those engagements or training engagements in such a way that you identify the champions within the workforce who are then able to light up the scenarios within their respective communities. And then moving to the far right, when we think about, well, where does perhaps the greatest opportunity lie? That's now when you've already got some of those initial value pieces in place, you can now start getting at the heart of the operations of the organization to do more sophisticated types of engagements, such as building workflows to automate and optimize business processes, integrating StaffHub with workforce management applications. So we've got an API for StaffHub that is currently in preview, and people will have the ability in order to integrate StaffHub with other workforce or HR management applications out there. Plus, I spoke about the ability to optimize your resource allocation by surfacing insights, maybe some of them coming from IoT-enabled scenarios. From a managed services perspective, I would say this is where you can switch now from your reactive managed services to more of your proactive managed services. So here you're looking at the ability to monitor and respond to security threats, or even the ability to go and optimize device health based on some of the advanced analytics that you see coming through from the Windows 10S environment. And then last but certainly not least, you've got the ability to start thinking about what is your IP that you could package up over here in order to enable these workers and make them more effective. And here we see examples of partners delivering things like training solutions, maybe things that automate the translation of training material into multiple languages, different languages for multinationals, maybe bots that help to facilitate access to HR type information or even HR processes. Here you could throw into that bucket the mixed reality service management solutions that I mentioned. Really the opportunities there are endless in terms of the types of things that you could be doing. So we've got a set of content that I'll point you to at the bottom of the call, where essentially we've got a lot more detail around different scenarios built out. For example, over here, you can see how we've taken the same format and approach, but we've said, what if you don't want to go after the whole end-to-end value proposition for first-line workers? Maybe if what makes sense for you as a partner is to focus very specifically on the digitized business process opportunity. And if that is the case, then you've got the ability to do that specifically. All right. So, moving on. What I also wanted to highlight was we've got a few of the early customer references starting to come through. We see some really good examples and feedback from customers that have started to adopt and deploy these products and capabilities within their organization. I think one that stood out for me specifically is Marriott, where at Ignite they were sharing their experience specifically around the hurricane season, where it was very difficult for them sometimes to communicate with some of their first-line working employees who were in hotels that were in locations that were affected by the hurricanes. They had started pilots of Firstline Workforce and Microsoft 365 F1 technologies. Some of their workers were enabled with those tools and some of them weren't, and they were sharing their experience in terms of how it was night and day in terms of their ability to communicate, coordinate with the employees that were enabled versus the ones that weren't. And so that, I think, was a great story in terms of just getting some first-hand insight in terms of how dramatically that could change things for them. I mean, one of the other scenarios and examples that they gave was prior to them enabling some of those employees with those types of tools, in order for them to get training information out to those workers, they would have to send down content and try and organize to gather everybody into a break room at a particular time in order to share that with them. Very hit and miss type of approach, whereas giving them access to that information via a SharePoint site with Stream basically allowed them to consume that type of content in a time that was most appropriate for them, and basically enable them to deliver that type of training and material in a much more efficient way. And we're starting to see more and more of these customer scenarios come through. So far we feel pretty good about the way that this is resonating with customers. What I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking to you about one of the key assets that we created in order to help partners such as yourselves go after the first-line worker opportunity. As Michael mentioned right at the beginning of the call, many of you will already have all the technical capability that you need in order to be able to deliver solutions in the space. Basically, our observation has been that for the most part, the new muscle that needs to be built is around being able to, number one, get access to different types of stakeholders within the customer. Number two, being able to effectively sell the new value proposition of empowering the first-line workforce and really building out a strong business case in terms of convincing the customer to act now. So the business value assessment is aimed at doing exactly that. What it does is it takes some of the research that we've done with Forrester around the total economic impact for customers that are adopting the first-line workforce offering, and essentially turns that into a tool that you can then use in order to drive a business value workshop with a customer. So to walk you through what that looks like, this is a practical walkthrough of the workbook that is available for download. You'll get the link at the bottom of the presentation. But essentially what that looks like is you start up, you've got the ability to work through it step by step with a customer. You've got a set of questions for each one of the 5 value pillars. And essentially what you're trying to get to is you're trying to get a sense of where is the customer today versus potentially where they would like to be. And so by asking these series of questions, you can uncover some of the pain points that they might be experiencing, but not necessarily, putting a label to, and not necessarily, actually driving a solution towards. And so very basically, you'll go through the set of questions for each pillar, and you'll indicate whether or not this is something that the customer already has in place, whether it's something that they are planning to do, or whether it's something that they've decided not to do anything about right now. And by working through that, that starts to give you the comparison between the as is versus the to be. As you go through that, it gives you the opportunity to capture some of the manual processes or the processes that might be ripe for optimization, so that you can then double click on that and go into a deeper dive in terms of exactly what that entails. And what the benefits might be in terms of digitizing that or optimizing that. It also gives you the ability to collect information on what are some of the legacy systems out there that might be replaced by implementing some of this technology. So that can also help you strengthen the business case by saying, well, we'll take out this cost over here, and that will help us in order to deliver efficiencies on the other side. You've got a fairly granular level of control, so we've got a whole bunch of default data that's entered in there based on the research that we've done, but you do have the ability, as usual, to override that and put in your own specific details relative to the customer situation. So that means that you can fine-tune it based on things that they have identified through the analysis that you've done with them. And that's another example of being able to, for example, say, hey, the default amount of time that a manager might spend on creating schedules for his direct reports might be 1.5 hours per week, and the default reduction that is typically experienced by using StaffHub is in the region of 16%, but in this scenario with this customer, it's more or it's less depending on, what you find. Just going to move through this quickly. That then is going to build out for you the cost portfolio, and you have the ability to then fine-tune that based on the savings that might exist. As I mentioned, when you identify some of those business processes that might be ripe for optimization, you also have the ability to really go in and define at a fairly granular level what those savings might be over a 3-year time frame. And essentially, once you've done that, it brings you to a point where, as I said, you've got the as is versus the to be environment. On the left-hand side, we've got what we've called the current Firstline Worker Empowerment Score. On the right-hand side, you've got the desired Firstline Worker Empowerment Score, and it gives you the breakdown by pillar in terms of where the specific gaps are coming from. Is it perhaps in fostering culture and community, or is it perhaps in delivering real-time expertise? Where is it that is your highest priority area at the moment based on what's surfaced in the customer discussions? Off of the back of that, we turn it into a cash flow summary and gives you the basic return on investment calculations. This then can be packaged up into a report out. We give you a basic template that you can use as a starting point, and you can then customize that further. So what I'll walk through in the next few slides is essentially what that template looks like, so that you can see how the results from the assessment flow into that, and how that might then be the starting point for a presentation that you might share with a customer. So over here, good old Contoso, for example, might have a great opportunity in order to empower their 3,300 firstline workers. You can see the assessment was completed. They had a fairly low empowerment score to begin with, 17%. And based on the feedback that they provided, their desired state is to be at a score of 92. And basically that translates into a net present value of over $4 million or $1,300 per firstline worker. And on the right-hand side, you can see a summary of the key calculations there, how much in hours you might save per firstline worker, what the reduction in turnover rate might be, and what the increased productivity of the firstline managers might be. And then the remainder of the slides, we don't have to go into too much detail here, but basically just build out the rest of the story in terms of where are the key gaps that were identified, what are the priority recommendations, what are the first things that they might consider doing, what do the financials look like behind that in terms of where you're going to get those savings from, and where you're going to get those, where you're going to get that value coming through, and what the cash flow would look like if you were to invest in the project up front, and then reap the benefits of that going forward. So a fairly standard approach from a business value perspective, but just really taking all of the research that we've done and capturing it in a tool that you can then use as a starting point for your own discussions. So that takes me to the end of some of the opportunity, partner opportunity pieces, as well as some of the key assets that we've built out in order for you to be able to accelerate your time to market. Over here, what you can see is more of a complete catalog in terms of everything that's available online today. So if you were to go to that link that you see at the bottom, partners.office.com/Firstline Worker, you would see these sets of assets. On the far left-hand side, we've got a whole bunch that are there in order to help you learn more about the business opportunity. So here's a bunch of first-hand research that we've commissioned, and a whole bunch of survey information that I've referred to throughout the call that you can then go and read up more about and even share with your customers. We've got a whole bunch of industry studies that we've commissioned, and you can see some of that information there under the industry addressability report. And over there, basically what we did was commissioned an exercise to understand the size of the market by industry, and then also what the breakdown is by first-line worker and knowledge worker, and then what are some of the key scenarios that we think are going to be a sweet spot for us on the modern workplace side of things using our Microsoft 365 value proposition. So that's a really good read and something that you can drill into. It also links you to the various partner playbooks that we've got. So, for example, there's a collaboration partner playbook, security and compliance partner playbook, and Microsoft 365 power device partner playbook. And you can go and take a look at each one of those. We've embedded a first-line worker section with each one of them to make sure that as you're thinking about security and compliance, you can also get the information relevant to first-line worker within that. As you're thinking about collaboration, you can identify the first-line worker opportunity within that. In the second pillar, you've got some additional links to a catalog of training, information, online videos, etc. that will help you just to get a little bit more up to speed on the underlying products that support the first-line worker solutions and offerings that you might be building. The third pillar really focuses on the offer development guide and business value assessment. So that's where you can download the assessment as well as some guidance on how to think about building out an offer in that space. And then on the right-hand side, the Grow Your Business pillar, that's where you can get access to customer-ready materials that you can then use in order to build out your own sales pitch decks that your sellers can then take to customers in order to deliver those types of sessions. So with that, we're pretty much approaching the end. What I would ask as next steps is just for you to, number one, consider learning more about the first-line worker category and the opportunity that it represents. So really take advantage of those materials that I've just spoken to you about, some really good and interesting content there. Two is what we see as the best practice is actually developing an offer that you can use in order to proactively go after this opportunity. We've seen really strong collaboration partners of ours that have delivered these types of solutions in the past, but didn't have an offer in order to really drive the discussion proactively via their sellers. And by putting something together that basically equips your field force in order to go after those solutions more proactively and to start educating the customers out there, making them aware of what more they could be doing in order to unlock the value of their first-line workers. And then three, take advantage of the resources that we've got in order to start upselling and cross-selling to your existing customers. Because without any doubt, you've got a whole bunch of customers where you've certainly delivered solutions today and where they've probably got a bunch of employees that you could then extend the value that you're able to offer to in order to upsell and cross-sell and further monetize that customer. So with that, that concludes the content that I wanted to share with you. And now we've got a few more minutes for me to loop back and see what questions, if any, we've got in the window over here. Please also, if there's any additional questions that you'd like to ask, now's the chance to throw them in there because we've got a few minutes to address them. First one that I can see here is, what about enterprise application? What is the process to see if they will be available in the store? You don't see it taking off for anyone with apps. One update that's not compliant, it breaks. So yes, I don't have the process for you off the top of my head in terms of exactly step by step what you do, but there is the ability for an IT department or for you as a partner that's managing that environment to take an enterprise application and to make it available through the store so that it's available for download. And this was a really important point. It's not just limited to applications that are designed with a modern interface. It is also enterprise applications that can be made available for download through that store and for deployment through that store in such a way that you're able to use them on that device. The key point being there that you've had the ability to very specifically validate what goes onto the device and prevents any kind of side loading or any kind of application that or bloatware that might get on there that will over time either deteriorate performance or perhaps compromise the security of the device. And that's all the questions that we've received so far. So if there's nothing else, then I think we can bring the session to a close. Please take a look at the URL that I shared, the partners.office.com/Firstline Worker. That's the place to go to in order to get access to those materials. And look forward to seeing some of the work that you'll be doing out there and promoting some of the work that you'll be doing too. With that, over to you, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks, Oriel. Appreciate you taking us through that. I thought that was really great information for our partners. It was really good positioning guidance, and I know everybody appreciates when you kind of take us through the different revenue opportunities with both the project services and the managed services. And then thanks for taking us through the business value assessment as well. I didn't realize how that had really been uniquely tailored for that Firstline Worker experience, and then also the great resources and the playbook. So good stuff today. Thank you. And for this month, that concludes our call, and look forward to seeing you all next month. So good call, and we'll see you next month. Take care.